Hey there, we're going live early tonight because thankfully making a furniture delivery to needy family that's going to interfere with the 7 o'clock hour. So some of you are watching live now, others can catch it after the fact. We're starting a brand new study. I'm excited about that. Want you to be having your Bible open to the book of Luke, one of the great four gospels that we're privileged to have by way of inspiration. Look forward to studying through Luke. I'll give you just an intro kind of tonight to set the table for our future studies. May get in a little bit first four verses or so of chapter 1. So I think Luke's going to be an interesting study. I look forward to learning some things, being reminded of things maybe I've forgotten over the years. I'll tell you this, of the four Gospels, Luke, for whatever reason, I keep file folders, articles, different things on each book of the Bible, different topics. Luke happens to be the one that I have less information on. I don't know why that is. I would like to think I've preached and taught from Luke from about as many of the other Gospels, but that did kind of reinforce the need for me to get in there and dig and find some more material and look at some more resources. So I hope it's an encouraging study for you. Let's talk about the author. Traditionally, Luke has been attributed as the author. That's not a surprise there. He is not named, incidentally, in this book anywhere. Early Christians acknowledge and refer to him as being the author. Justin Martyr, Tertullian, a couple of those respected sources there. Luke was not an apostle. He was, in fact, in Colossians 4, verse 14, called the beloved physician. So he was a doctor. He was a companion with Paul in his travels. He's mentioned elsewhere, in addition to Colossians 4:14 and 2 Timothy 4:11 and Philemon verse 24. There are sections in the book of Acts that incidentally is the companion volume. It's volumes 1 and 2, if you think about it. You've got the gospel, life of Jesus, Acts is the history of the church. And so he's mentioned as a companion with Paul very clearly, even in the introduction as we get to it. It's going to be important that Paul furnishes Luke with some of the information, very likely by inspiration, that's contained within this book here. Many think that Luke was Gentile. That would place him as the only of the four gospel authors Gentile. You see in this record references to the Gentiles, not that the others exclude them, but you see some of the outcasts and even women that are highlighted more in Luke's gospel than the others. And so this is a book that has 24 chapters, four less than Matthew, comparatively the other longest gospel. But even though it's four chapters shorter, it is actually just a little bit longer lengthwise. In fact, Luke has the distinction of being the longest New Testament book compared to all of those there. Let's talk about the significance. In addition to being written kind of toward the Gentile mind, it is the fullest report of Jesus' ministry. It contains, as each gospel does, some unique material, some things we would not have the benefit of knowing had Luke not recorded those. 2 Timothy 3:16 is the verse that indicates that all scripture is given by inspiration of God, is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, fully equipped or furnished unto every good work. And so as we think about it being part of God's inspired record, one of the four biographies as we think about of Jesus there, we'll wait for a key text. That's kind of one of those debatable things. Chapter 4:17 through 20 would be a good one. There are 32 Old Testament connections. Many times that's a direct quote or reference to the Old Testament, and they're scattered over about 15 of the chapters there. And so Luke will borrow, although he's writing primarily to a Greek or Gentile mind, he'll reference the Old Testament as corroboration for certainly things that Jesus did in fulfillments of the prophecies. Thinking about some of the unique characteristics of this gospel, Luke spends more time on the birth narrative, starting with John the Baptist all the way. Chapter 1, verse 5 is where you have a lengthy introduction to him. And then a lot of detail given even to the birth of Jesus and the boyhood, which many of the Gospels skip right over there. So we're indebted to this Gospel to furnish us just treasured material from the life of Jesus. I want to share with you a little bit from a Disciples Study Bible that I have in my library. It says the world into which Jesus came had numerous forces and powers harking their wares to people who were hungry, ill, despondent, blind, lame, enslaved, and freed. Now, thinking about the world 2,000 years ago, it's not that different than the world today. There are still people in those backgrounds. And so the gospel answers the question, what place did Gentiles and the outcast, the ill-treated by society, even the women, regarded largely in the first century as kind of a second-class citizen, what place did she have in the world of their day? Now, thinking about the context of the Gospel of Luke, I want you to think about some specific challenges to certainly what vied for the attention and the care and the love of the people back in that day. Rome was the world power, and there would be an attraction to the Roman way of life. There would be a temptation, I guess, even to worship the emperor, as some were wont to do there. And so, if Rome didn't hold out the allure to the average person in the first century, certainly the Greek lifestyle, contemporary culture, sophistication, learning, that would have, again, vied for the attention of the average person that even Luke is addressed to. There were mystery religions back then, some of those predated Christianity. No doubt many, certainly from a pagan background, would have been charmed by them, and then even Judaism. There were Gentile converts to Judaism, and so this that kind of lost its power and its prestige by the first century, still held out an attraction to some. And so, with all of those things vying for the attention, Christianity is going to emerge. And maybe the question is, why would I be a Christian? Why would I believe in Jesus? What could he possibly offer me? And that's true in the first century as well as the 21st century, when I've got all these competing lifestyles and ideologies and worldviews going for me. So we kind of want to pursue this study of the Gospel of Luke with that aspect of thinking about what is it that Jesus is to us, what does his life continue to mean for us, somewhat removed from several centuries there. Let's do this. Let's simply have our Bibles open to Luke chapter 1 and read the first four verses. Some would call this a prologue, an introduction. It kind of sets the table and it explains a rationale for why Luke writes this epistle. Tucked in these four verses are several things. In fact, I want to look at 5 A's with you, 5 words that start with the letter A. And I'll share from the New King James Version here. Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word delivered them to us. It seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the certainty of those things in which you were instructed. This is a beautiful and a very classic way, kind of an introduction that would have been pretty common among the Greeks of their day. Luke is not a second-rate historian or a second-rate writer. His style is lofty in many respects there. I want to think about what he says in these first 4 verses, kind of slowing it down, rewinding, breaking it down a little bit. He acknowledges that others have written about Jesus. Very likely by this time, the Gospel of Mark would have been in circulation. It's hard to date the writing of the different Gospels, and in some cases the epistles, although for many of them we know a pretty specific time frame. Some would say the earliest that Luke might have been written was in the AD 60s. Others might vie for a later date in that. But here's what Luke knew. He knew that there were other accounts, plural. Some of those, if you're talking about the Gospel of Mark, inspired. Others would have been uninspired. They might have been just memoirs or handwritten accounts. And so he doesn't reference who all he has is referring to there, but some have set in order a narrative, a story, an account. In fact, that's our first A word. Here is an account. It is a story of the story. It is a narrative of the best story or narrative, if you will. And he says things which have been fulfilled among us. When he gets around to Jesus, that's who he's clearly going to have reference to, things fulfilled among us. And again, he's saying these aren't things done in a corner, these aren't hidden. Christianity wasn't based on kind of uh, a very secretive, almost just here's something that happened with only a couple of witnesses there. No, many people were able to see that. He says in verse 2, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word delivered them to us. Now, Luke is going to say, I didn't see Jesus, didn't know him personally. The things I'm sharing aren't because I was an eyewitness. I heard a miracle firsthand. I saw uh, uh, something being done or heard a sermon, but he's searching and striving and paying attention, I would say again, guided by inspiration to give the most full and accurate account that he could. When he's talking about the things fulfilled and eyewitnesses, let's talk about the accomplishments of Jesus. He's giving an account. This is again more than just a story, it is a capital S story of Jesus, the accomplishments of our Savior having reference there. And then look at the authority there. The ones who were eyewitnesses, this would have included the apostles and some others as well, they were ministers, as he calls them, of the word delivered them to us. And so they were commissioned, you go tell other people. And Luke says, I am in that link of ones who have been taught by those who know what they're talking about. So there's a chain of authority that he's referencing there. I want you to see how in verse 3 what Luke says. It seemed good to me also. Seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first. How can you have perfect understanding of something? I'm kind of interrupting here with the question. How can you have perfect understanding of something that you're not an eyewitness to? Isn't that a fair question? I would say, maybe by way of answering that, if a person did not live in the days of Abraham Lincoln, let's say they were born a few years after he was assassinated, but their mission in life was to uncover as much as they could. They wanted to know President Lincoln, and they didn't spare any resources. They went to ones who did know him and interviewed them, and they looked at and researched, scoured all this. Could they know President Lincoln? Would it be a second-hand or secondary information? You know, people that continue to write books about presidents, sometimes living in the 1800s, 1700s, and even more ancient characters, they don't have the benefit of first-hand knowledge. They weren't eyewitnesses, and yet many of us put a lot of stock in the research that they've done. It's as if they knew or the details they give. And so I would also add to that, while Luke seemingly is doing his own research, he is guided by God. Second Peter 1:20 and 21, another great passage about inspiration, talks about certainly in the Old Testament those were guided along. No man ever spoke from any private origin. Holy men of God spoke as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. He had the agency, the superintendence of this third member of the Godhead in what he was doing. And so this accuracy. So Luke can write about a perfect understanding. That's not to say that he could say, I know when Jesus' birthday was, or I know what his favorite color or food. No, it's the understanding of, in a complete, comprehensive way about the most important facts about the life of Jesus. And so Luke says, I want to give you an orderly account. That word orderly, as I researched it, it's not necessarily a chronological account. Many things in this gospel did happen sequentially, but it's an orderly account. It's kind of an arranged or a well thought out pattern of development. And so as we go through Luke, we'll see those things. So he's concerned with accuracy. I don't want to go on hearsay alone. I don't want to certainly give credence to some document or to some person who may have some very far out remembrances or takeaways from Jesus. No, he's wanting to know because there would be unverifiable and even false claims about Jesus in the first century. I want to bypass those and get to the heart of what's really trustworthy. And so let's let our fifth letter A, be authenticity. He goes on to say, of this oral account, most excellent Theophilus, incidentally, this is a gospel written to an individual. I'm glad that that we can read Theophilus' mail. We can understand this is a letter not just to him, but for us as well. I don't think that Luke ever envisioned that this would be read by one person and discarded or simply just done away with. The stamp of authenticity. In verse 4, here's what he says, that you may know the certainty of those things in which you were instructed. This certainty. I want you to have full confidence that what you have been told, certainly in this document, is about a real and a powerful and a persuasive character that is thankfully part of history. So let me review quickly those 5 A's with you: an account about the accomplishments specifically of Jesus, the authority that resides in him and in this document, the accuracy of it, and finally the authenticity of it. Now, one more question before we leave this introduction. Who was Theophilus? Some think that he was a Roman official. There's something even about the most excellent that would lend some evidence to that. We're not really sure who he was. Some speculate he might have been an early Christian, or he might have been one who was interested in Christianity. Hey, Luke, since I know you in some capacity, share with me, tell me what it is about this man. Why should I believe in him? And of note, if you go to the book of Acts, that, as I'll say again, is a companion volume, it's 1 and 2, you find there a reference to Theophilus. And so Luke will write and later tell him, while I gave a former account to you of all that Jesus began to do and teach, which is a great commentary on what Luke's about, but he says, let me give you the rest of the story. Let me tell you the follow-up and then what happened in the aftermath there. All right, so Luke's got a purpose. He's got an individual he's writing to. He's wanting us to know the veracity of what it is he says about Jesus. And so leaving that, what is he going to say? Well, it's going to be the first thing. Interestingly, it's not about Jesus yet. We'll get to that later in chapter 1. But there's going to be a reference to a forerunner of Jesus here. Let's read it in Luke 1, verse 5. And I want you to see how he takes pains to describe the setting, to give some chronological markers to when this was happening here. It says, and I'm reading again from the New King James Version, there was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah. His wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments, ordinances of the Lord blameless. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well advanced in years. Now, if you were to read Luke for the first time, you'd be thinking, what's that all about? That sounds interesting. And so Luke is setting the table. This gospel is for the forerunner of Jesus, one who's actually going to be related to him. And so if you look in, for example, the book of Mark, it pretty clear and quickly out of the gate, you see the ministry of John the Baptist. Luke backs it up to even before his birth. And so I think it's interesting to look at some things about John the Baptist. By the way, as you go through Luke, when you study through this gospel, we have the benefit of history, we have the benefit of archaeology, different historical records, some of those that have come to light fairly recently, that in a powerful way confirm the truthfulness of this story. For example, if you see a reference to a person, to a political leader, to a place, although through the years some people have doubted and been critical of whether these really happened or these were people in power, it's amazing how this, along with the rest of the New Testament, strongly convicts us of the believability, if that's a word, of this record here. And so it's in Herod as he's ruling in Judea there. There's a priest named Zacharias. That division of Abijah mentioned back in the Chronicles there talks about his wife also being of the priestly tribe. If you were an Old Testament priest, as Zacharias was, you couldn't Well, you had to be married, number one. You couldn't marry a divorcee, couldn't marry a widow, and so you didn't have to marry someone of the tribe of Levi, but it so happens that Zacharias did. And I want you to think about the commentary on their lifestyle. They were righteous before God. They walked in the commandments and the ordinances of God blameless. Understand something about this couple that we introduced to. They were not perfect in spite of their relative goodness. In fact, I believe they were chosen because of that goodness to be instruments in the hand of God to bring about a very special child, not on the order of Jesus, not perfect like the Son of God, but who would nevertheless fulfill an important role, a crucial role. And so it matters how we live. As you think about just some nuggets, what do I take away from this study? It matters that I'm righteous before God. Let me say this. In the world today, there are a lot of standards for what is good, for what is moral, ethical. You hear those words bannered about a lot. And so righteous before God really is all that matters. There's some people that are held up, in other words, by society as good role models. Here's the way you ought to think and act and do. And sometimes you look at their life and you look at the Bible and they don't measure up. They don't square. Some of them are advocating for things the Bible clearly condemns. And so righteous before God, walking in the commandments and the ordinances of God blameless. I imagine they had some people that might have thought that they were holier than thou, might have criticized them, even among their own people, among the other Jews. It didn't matter, did it? And then you see in verse 7 a situation in their family that likely brought some pain and some heartache. It says, although they are old, they never had children. Reason is specified as Elizabeth's barrenness. And so she would join the ranks of Sarah in the Old Testament, and Rachel and Rebecca and Hannah, who at times had no children. In fact, waited later in life to have a child. And so it's going to be interesting as that foreshadowing is already there. They have no child. They're both advanced in years, and yet something is going to change there. God is the God of the not impossible. God is the God of the possible, in other words. Nothing's too hard for him. As you think about this man serving as a priest, we'll read a few more verses here before we close this evening. It says in verse 8, so it was that while he was serving as priest before God in the order of his division, according to the custom of the priesthood, his lot fell to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. Let me stop right there for a second. There were 24 different divisions or orders specified in the Old Testament. And so twice a year, the different priests from that order, some believe that depending on how populous those orders were, this might be a task you would only do one time in your whole life. For some, it would be more than that, but this was not an everyday occurrence. And so when the lot fell for Zacharias to do it, he's serving. This was his specified week, his order there. He's burning incense. He's going into the temple of the Lord. The whole multitude of people outside praying. They did this likely at 9 a.m. and about 3:30 in the afternoon. It says, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, Luke 1:11, standing on the right side of the altar of the incense. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. Now put yourself in the sandals of Zacharias. If you were there serving, it's a holy occasion. You're in awe of being inside the holy place of the temple to begin with. And now as you're praying, burning incense, an angel speaks to you. That'd be enough to cause any of us to be more than a little frightened, I think. The angel says to him, do not be afraid, Zacharias. Right. Sure. Chalk it up to just an everyday occurrence. Well, it's natural for you to be afraid. But the angel says, don't be. For your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. Zacharias was praying. How many times had he prayed for a son? I have no idea. Was it the case that he literally, while he's serving inside the temple, is praying again? He's old. They're well advanced in age. It's almost laughable. It's kind of like an Abraham and Sarah. And yet, the angel who later is going to be identified as Gabriel says, I've heard what you prayed about, and sure enough, it's going to happen. You're going to have not just a child, but a son. And let me tell you what his name is going to be. It's going to be John. We're going to leave right there and encourage you to go ahead and be reading, studying further ahead in Luke 1:14 and following. And we'll see some more details about John the Baptist, the forerunner, the herald of Jesus, the voice of one crying in the wilderness. And so, thinking about how God is using people, He did back then, He's using us today. He may not have a miraculous manifestation of some task or ministry, but we are to be able and ready accomplices in the great work of God. I think that's one of the great takeaways from this section here about Zacharias and Elizabeth. We'll study Sunday night, probably about 5 o'clock, kind of the aftermath of this section here. But be praying about our study in Luke. Hope it's a benefit to you and encouragement to you in some way. Thank you again for studying with us. God bless. Remember prayer time. I think Josh is leading that tonight, 8 o'clock here on our church webpage. God bless till we meet again.